today we're going to talk you through some of the common challenges that we see in the building material space, and why you need to act now. So this is for you if you are a manufacturer of building materials, that you might be stuck wrangling spreadsheets for each of your merchants or your customers, or sending out to different marketplaces or channels. You might have been getting some pressure put on you because there are lots of new legislation or regarding product traceability or this code of conduct for product information. So these things are coming in. So there's a lot of pressure to act now. You might have even had some of the merchants writing to you and telling you that they will no longer accept your product information unless it's in the BMF product data template. And you might not know where to even start by sorting this out. And then I'm sure most of you would prefer faster listings, fewer errors, and better online sales. We are members of the BMF, and so we talk to a lot of suppliers, a lot of merchants. We understand the challenges from the merchant end and the supplier end. So that's why we're here talking to you about that today.
Product data is super important within the building supplies industry, primarily just due to the nature of the products, right? They're highly technical products, and they're products that are used within, technical projects that require a high level of data accuracy. But really, there's a lot of even more growing pressure now being put on suppliers, right? And it's kind of coming from all the angles, right? So if you think about, as Claire mentioned, there's a lot of new rules. So, the CCPI, that's a product data initiative. It was kind of introduced after the Grenfell Tower tragedy, and it's basically an initiative to help suppliers make sure that their product information is clear, accurate, up to date, and unambiguous. It's developed by the CPA, the Construction Products Association. You can go and have a read about it. I'm sure you're aware of it, but it's definitely worth looking at. There's also general kind of post-Grenfell safety pressure coming in, and the set of rules. There were a bunch of building safety reforms introduced after that, Building Safety Act and some other ones. So again, high quality, accurate data is almost like mandatory to conform to these rules now. And then there's also EPDs, these are environmental product declarations. It's basically a standardized document that communicates the environmental impact of the product that you're selling, which obviously requires good data. So, there's all these rules. And then on top of that, you would have heard a lot about the BMF template. You might be partaking in it already as a supplier. This is a industry standardized template for product data acquisition from suppliers. So it's what ideally suppliers will populate to then put data in a standardized format into a data pool that the BMF are building, where then merchants will be able to take that data out in a standardized format. And there's 300 fields. We've had a good look through it, and they're all fields that you need to populate as a supplier. So that's kind of rules and standardization in one angle. But then there's this other angle that's really obvious, right? Is that the fact is buyers expect you to have a good digital product experience, like whether your supplier selling direct to a merchant, selling through a merchant, or the merchant themselves expect you to have all your data digitized, and then on top of that, you chuck in things like AI. You can get recommendations of products on ChatGPT now, so your product data needs to be accurate and complete to feed into those large language models that kind of index your data. So huge amounts of pressure for both suppliers and merchants, and this kind of, we call this the product data crisis. It's this big friction point, growing demand and lack of supply, between the kind of both sides of the industry, which is obviously really challenging to come up with a solution to. So, Claire mentioned we talk to a lot of both suppliers and merchants in this industry. We see the same things over and over again when we look at when we go into businesses. That basically most businesses are just not compliant with a lot of these industry rules. The risk of being non-compliant is you lose business, right? Or you can't meet safety acts, or there's legal issues that can stem from that. So it's almost like compliance is top of the pyramid, right? It's kind of a non-negotiable. And some of these are going to be mandated to the point where you will get in trouble if you don't meet them effectively. We also see a lot of just missing data. If you go, I guarantee if I go to like most supplier websites, there's just missing data. Most businesses have the data, but it's kind of getting the data into digitized format that then you can actually give to your customers or your merchants. And that is really underpinned by a lack of data governance in a lot of businesses. There's just no ownership, particularly in suppliers, where you're more focused on manufacturing the products and actually digitizing that data. And we just see a lot of duplication and a lot of spreadsheets and offline sources and that sort of thing. So the pain points are always the same really. And the big question is, how do you become compliant? How do you get complete data, and how do you improve your governance and operations to solve some of these pain points?
Yeah, and I guess, as we keep saying, we see it from both ends of the spectrum. So it's not about pointing fingers at either end, but we do see this bottleneck that happens between suppliers wanting to get their product live on, within merchants. And we've done some analysis on how many interactions or the time that it takes for products from onboarding to validation to launch. Sometimes it can be up to 10 to 15 interactions on one SKU. And then you've got the validation of the merchant actually going and verifying the product data. That's additional time. And then you're talking, from it can be up to a month from receiving the product to being able to launch it, which from a merchant perspective is really frustrating. But also from a supplier perspective, if there's somebody else that can deliver this quicker, a merchant will sell it. It's also, there's a real competitive advantage the quicker and easier that you can make this for the merchant. So the common, I think it's as Ben just explained, delayed product launches, loss of sales and revenue, the manual work that your team gets, just bogged down in, the risk of non-compliance versus having, great merchant collaboration, a standardized way of the merchants being able to intake your data, automation and validation, and then actually being able to enrich that data really quickly. That's kind of what we want to try and help you unblock. So, this is very common for us to hear from merchants. If the data is not complete, the product's not going live. We work with some merchants that if there's no images, your product doesn't get on their website. If you don't have even the core, even sometimes the core amount of data is not enough for them to put it on, they need more. That's what you're risking, is just having no visibility. The other frustration for merchants is that they are spending hours reworking supplier files to put them in a format that then is able to get them online. So again, that slows down the process. It makes it less efficient. And if there's another supplier out there that can do that easier, they're going to get online faster.
So why is it so hard to get data in a standardized compliant format to your merchants? Well, the fact is that within most suppliers, businesses or manufacturing businesses, there's a lot of challenges with a lot of fragmented data across your business. Like if someone comes to you and says, get me the product record in this format for this product for these 300 attributes, even just for one product, if you think about all the different sources where that information has to come from and the level of effort that you have to spend, finding, extracting, normalizing, transposing that information, it's a huge thing. So, when we go into like a supplier's business and we look at like the fragmentation of their product data, we see it in legacy systems like ERPs and PLMs. We see it in PDFs. A lot of the time we see it in spreadsheets. We have actually had customers where it's all stored in a PowerPoint, believe it or not. And, getting that data out of those offline or unstructured sources is a big job, right? Someone has to sit there and put the data into a single place, or in some cases, if you're producing data sheets, which many suppliers probably are, you're consolidating that information in a data sheet, but it's not in a digitized form. It's just it's probably usually in a PDF, in a table somewhere or whatever. So that's almost like the product specification data and all of like the core attributes. And then on top of that, a lot of merchants want richer content as well, like descriptions. And I know in the BMF template there's lots of that sort of content that's required. Someone's got to write all that content, right? And potentially writing that content in different variations as well for different merchants. So ultimately the big problem is just finding the data a lot of the time inside your organization. The data is there, right? Because you make the products in many cases. It's just finding it and then being able to use it as a single source. So the fact is, you need to go and find it, right? You need to go find the data, and you need to create these kind of product records. But then the problem is, you need to make some investment, right? You can invest in people to do this work. You can invest in outsource support like companies do with us. You can invest in tooling. There's like AI tooling, there's PIMs, there's other types of tooling that support these kind of these attribute capture enrichment processes. But you'll be asked to generate a business case for that. The fact is that the great thing about product data improvements, you can directly attribute it to a lot of good measures like time to market. So if you have like your data in a single source that's fully complete, when you have a good process for doing that, you can improve product launch time into like new merchants, for example. You can save a lot of time with much more automated processes. You can save a lot of money on content creation, so you shouldn't be writing product descriptions and features manually anymore. You can get AI tools that do that very well, and ultimately all of this comes back to sales uplift. So a wholesale product data improvement project across your range will generate you a sales uplift in many different ways, whether that's new routes to market, whether that's more sales through existing channels or merchants because your product data is better than your competitors. It will generate you like tangible growth. So it's actually a lot easier than people think to create a business case around this stuff, because there's always a direct sales uplift.
I was just going to add on the content creation as well, is that we've had one manufacturer that I think that their benefit case was that they were able to save 70 grand a year on the creation of data sheets by automating that. So that's like a huge not only efficiency, but also a massive cost saving as well. So look, you've got to start somewhere with where you're at. I think we've kind of broken it down into stages, and I know that some of the people on the call today are BMF members, and I think they have a similar kind of bronze, silver, gold standard of what product data maturity looks like. And so we realize that with product data, actually in this industry, it's a bit like turning a big tanker. It's not going to happen overnight. There's some key, there's some really basic things that you could do this week that would fundamentally change what you're doing with product data. And then you can build on that. So first of all is fixing the basics. It's about doing an audit of your data model, look at what you've got, and get your house in order in that sense, and build out that. Look at your core attributes, so your dimensions, specs, units, all of that are they complete? Are they normalized? Making sure just that you're starting with those really basic standard attributes. Then you looking at something like that, if you're a BMF member, looking at the BMF template and ensuring that all of the mandatory BMF fields that are in there, that you're able to actually complete those. That's a really good way just to do an audit of what you've got. That would mean that for most merchants, you could be onboarded. Some, as I alluded to before, if you don't have, like imagery that they can use or other things, that might be a red line for them. But most merchants, this is enough. And this is more than just your ERP data, I think, is the other thing. Don't just give them an export of your ERP, because what abbreviation that you've tried to fit into your 15-character ERP description is not good enough for what they need to be able to sell your product. Then we move to silver. So silver is all about efficiency and automation. So might be, Ben spoke about some of the tools that you can use. So a PIM, a light PIM or a fancy PIM that's a product information management platform. That could be something that you look at, and that's a central repository. But it could even just be, as a starting point, a central location, a central repository where you're putting all of your assets, all of your, your spec sheets, your images, your videos that you are able to direct your merchants to go to pull those from. There is other tools. There's automation that Ben was talking about, automation tools like there's SKU Launch out there that will automatically enrich data. You can put lots of unstructured data like PDF, spreadsheets, what have you, into a tool like that, and it will actually pull out all of those attribute data and fill it into your data model. And then there's also standardizing your naming and taxonomy. That's another thing that a lot of businesses fail to kind of think about, is the categorization of their products. So what this enables you to do is to onboard with merchants at speed and at scale, I think, is the other thing. So it's not only just the speed of doing it, it's actually being able to do it properly. I think the other thing with just looking at the attributes and standardizing things, it's kind of looking at what you use internally is not always used externally in other businesses. So it's making sure that you are speaking the same language so that your products then get categorized correctly going forward. This is also part of the BMF template of, being able to standardize all of this data going forward. And then you've also then got your gold standard. So this is about being future ready. Again, if you're a BMF member, you might have heard ETIM. So ETIM's a certain classification that for the IDP, which is the industry data pool, they want all of the products will be kind of filled out to that model. So this is about, again, getting your data to a stage where you've got that completeness. Have you got all of the EPDs and the traceability information? Down the line, you might have heard of the digital product passport that's coming in due course. This will require a traceability of the product life cycle and how it can be recycled and what have you. And so that's, again, a lot of information that you're going to need to supply to adhere to for your product to have a digital product passport. It might be that your product information, so you might have, when you're getting efficient, you might have implemented something like a PIM. So that's, making sure that your PIM's integrated with your ERP and that PIM then can feed information to the industry data pool so that then merchants can go into that and pull it off. This is about really making things fast, trustworthy, and then also the AI ready. So AI needs structured information with context for it to be able to rank your products anywhere. If you don't have that, you won't get a look in. Then the other thing is getting a lot of businesses that keep that standard high. They have continuous enrichment and managed services of their product data to make sure that it stays at that high data. One of the risks that can happen with data pools is that the data gets put in and then never gets looked at again. And so I think that's one of the things that data pools just in general have got a bit of a bad rap, but that's only because they haven't been managed efficiently, where there's, good governance to make sure that there's traceability of products being updated when they're updated. I know that that's one of the goals, is that there'll be reminders about, is this product still as per you're selling it, all of that. Where gold is obviously where we want to get to as an industry. And so you can see where you're at the moment.
Awesome. So yeah, with all of that in mind, that kind of journey from bronze to gold, utopia. Yeah, what are some kind of practical and strategic things you can be thinking about now? So from a strategic perspective, right? So we've talked a lot about the BMF product data template. I think you can go and download it, can't you? If you remember. And it basically is just a big spreadsheet full of lots and lots of attributes that are kind of mandatory and fulfill all these like compliance regulatory requirements in a kind of standard way. So what you should do is download that template and go and audit your product data against it. It's a really good starting point to see like the level of completeness of data that you currently store and source internally to meet those sorts of requirements. It's a good representation of what merchants will need as well, will want to take from you. Then you can look at all of your products. We're big fans of prioritization. Like most of the enrichment products we run for customers, we do a prioritization. We take like, top selling SKUs or, highest compliance regulated SKUs or something like that. Look at the level of maturity you want to get to. Bronze is a great starting point. Look at tools you need to help to do that. You don't necessarily need a PIM to meet these requirements, particularly on the bronze silver side of things. If you're thinking about going and syndicating or feeding data automatically to merchants, and obviously you need a technical single source and something that can do that. But fundamentally, if you could do a lot of this either in a spreadsheet or in a very simple system. To go and look at tools, to at least just get that started, and put tools more for like enrichment and transposing rather than storage are a good starting point. And just do it incrementally, right? As we said, do chunks of SKUs at a time. You make it into an operational program, embed it into your OPEX. It doesn't have to be like a big project investment up front. And then what are some practical things along with actually doing those things? Well, BMF template is a good starting point to use that as a checklist. It actually has a checklist in it, doesn't it? In the first tab. Look at standardization of like product names. You could put all your assets in a shared folder in SharePoint. Everyone's got a SharePoint, right? Mostly. You could look at developing a really lightweight taxonomy if you don't have a taxonomy, which is like both the categories and the attributes that sit under each category. Just build a really simple one so you're starting somewhere. And if you're if you're not going to have a system that you put this data in, you could just create like a spec sheet template in an Excel that just mirrors the structure in BMF and just put it in a central place, and everyone in the organization can add to it. We've seen a lot of customers actually that do this. It's like you have all the attributes, you have the owner of each attribute who has to populate that attribute from all the different teams, and then everyone kind of jumps in and populates their bit of it. Even by doing this, whether you're like a tiny supplier, 100 SKUs, or a massive one with 10,000, it's a really good place to start. You can then test the effectiveness of the products that you have enriched fully. You can get feedback from your merchants and stuff.
Yeah, and I think that's the message of today. It's about, picking the low-hanging fruit, and small steps lead to big transformations with product data. Small, consistent steps, I think, is the thing. Often when you're trying to do one big overhaul of a project, it can get quite messy, but small, consistent steps will get you to where you need to get a lot faster. And this builds confidence and trust. The supplier merchant relationship is only going to strengthen if you do this. So it's all about turning what could be seen as messy or incomplete data into merchant ready content. We are offering free product data audits for anybody that's joined. And what we'll do is we can do an audit of your product data, and we can give you a really practical plan in under 30 minutes of 5 to 10 top priorities, that low-hanging fruit. So yeah, if that's something that you're interested in, reach out to Ben or myself, and we'll get that sorted for you. But thank you so much for joining everybody today.